Not pretty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Herd and 10 podcast. I'm your host, Jake Fortinsky, joined by my brother, Kevin. Not looking too impressed this evening, Kev. I'm feeling exactly the same way as you. The Bills preseason week 2 was a disaster. I think that's the best way to put it. A lot of things went wrong. I think I'd like to just talk about the one shining star from that week because Dalton Kincaid was about the only good thing that I think we can really talk about. He's the only player that had a nice showing. I would say at least met expectations, maybe exceeded just, in the limited snaps he took. I thought he looked really good. I thought he blocked well. I thought he ran his routes really well, really tight route running. And of course, catches, no drop balls. That is something that has not been a guarantee when it comes to the tight end position with the Buffalo Bills. We've seen that, enough of that with Dawson Knox, where there's been ups and downs with him. He's had some great moments and he's had some terrible moments. So far, I've only seen great from Dalton Kincaid. Kev, anything to add there about Dalton?
I will say, in addition to Dalton Kincaid looking great, our 2023 draft class as a whole, I really like the way our first 3-round picks are looking. I think Osiris Torrance has been a very pleasant surprise on our O-line. And I think Dorian Williams should arguably be starting at middle linebacker potentially. As we've mentioned before, Terrell Dodson does not look like a starter at all. He doesn't look like he's going to be an impact player. The first 2 preseason games, he looks completely lost. Terrell Bernard, when we saw him last year, he looked lost. He's hurt and is seemingly out of the running for the spot. And the only other guy we have really is AJ Klein, who's way past his prime. And yeah, he maybe be able to call plays and maybe he'll be a passable starter. That's with a big question mark. But I've really liked the way Dorian Williams is flying around. He looks like he has instincts. Yes, he's a little bit undersized, but I really don't think we have anything else. So I'm not sure what they're waiting for in terms of trying him because we really have nothing else. We have no options at middle linebacker at the moment. So that's a big concern. And, even looking back at our 22 draft class, 2022, I really don't like what I'm seeing from Kaiir Elam. He looks like a disaster at the moment, playing with no confidence, taking penalties. And same with our 3rd-round pick. I mean, Terrell Bernard, we haven't seen anything from him yet to say that he's a legitimate NFL player. But yeah, otherwise, obviously that preseason game didn't look great. Oh, Matt Barkley, he had one nice week last week, but he's not going to be the answer at backup. So anyways, moving on to another topic. Jake, you probably want to talk about this too, but our offensive tackles. This is an emerging major problem. So I want to see what you think about what's happening there. It looks like Jake's having some technical difficulties over there. So I'll take my own answer here. So I Do not like what I'm seeing from our offensive tackles at all. Dion Dawkins had a rough season last year, and he has gotten off to a really rough start with the preseason game this weekend. I don't like the way Dion Dawkins is trending. I think he's a fantastic guy. He seems to be loved by everybody in the city of Buffalo, everybody on the team. But I'm very concerned with his play on the field. Very concerned with his play on the field. Last year, I did not think he was even an average starter at left tackle. I was extremely concerned with what I saw this past weekend because it looked like it carried over from last season, where guys are beating him clean off the line. He's not opening holes on the running game. I don't know what happened to him because a couple years ago, he looked like he was getting better and better each season, and he was on the verge of maybe becoming an upper echelon left tackle. And he's getting paid like a really good left tackle, and he's just not showing up right now. So I don't know what the issue with him is, but we badly need him to figure it out because we don't have any other options at left tackle. Tommy Doyle was lost for the season. Brandon Shell retired. And we basically don't even have a proper swing tackle. I don't believe David Quesenberry is a starting level tackle in this league. And that brings me to our biggest problem on the entire team, in my opinion, which is Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown is in his third year on the Bills. He was a fourth-round pick in 2021. And we've seen him be often injured the last 2 years. And even when he's playing, he has not even been average at right tackle. I think he's been well below average. It is a very big problem that we did not address in the offseason. I thought we were going to go out and either draft a right tackle or sign a guy who at least could compete as a starter for the Bills at right tackle. That didn't happen. The Bills took a flyer on a low-level free agent in Brandon Shell. That didn't work out. He retired. We have Tommy Doyle on the roster for his third year. He's injured again. Not going to factor into the Bills this year. They did re-sign a guy who we had on our practice squad a couple years ago in Garrett McGinn. He is unlikely to be the answer at right tackle. He may make the final roster just because we don't have any good options. We've got Quesenberry as a backup, and that is about it. We have a couple other undrafted rookies that could end up making the team in Garangi and Vandemark. But again, these are not likely to be starting caliber tackles. With a team where we have one of the best rosters in the league, one of the three best quarterbacks in the league, and we have a massive tackle issue. It is completely unacceptable. This is a huge problem for this team. I'm not sure what Bean was thinking on this one, but we've got massive, massive problems that I don't really know how we're going to fix.
Well, I think, just jumping in here, I don't know, my video is not working. I'm having a lot of problems here, but I think, when you talk about obviously our offensive line with the struggles that we've had in the past and the fact that we haven't really gone out and fixed that problem, That's the big concern. And to me, I think it's a bit of a philosophical issue with the Buffalo Bills. And we see the same thing on the defensive line. Now, I'm not concerned about our defensive line, but it comes from the same philosophy, which is the coaching staff and the management office seems to prioritize the idea of having more of something rather than having higher quality. Because this is not the first year where the Bills have gone out and they've brought in some average or below average talent for both the offensive line and the defensive line instead of just bringing in one big piece that's going to make a great impact. So the Buffalo Bills, of course, made the move for Von Miller. That was a great move. He ended up getting injured. Okay, things didn't work out exactly last year the way we had planned, but he certainly made a positive impact both on the field and off the field. Really no concern there. My concern is that they have all these lower tier players that they continue to bring in who aren't really good enough to start, but the Bills think, oh, well, we'll rotate those guys, right? We'll have a fresh rotation, so the bodies will all be fresh every time they come out. But that philosophy just doesn't seem to be coming to fruition. And it's becoming more evidently an issue on the offensive side because, again, you bring in McGovern, again, a sort of an average lineman. You, of course, don't solve the right tackle issue at all. You don't bolster the left side in terms of the left tackle. There's hope that Deion Dawkins takes a step forward again, but it's obviously not looking that he's going to take that step forward. So my concern is that instead of spending 5 million, 7 million, 4 million, 6 million, spending a little bit on 3 or 4 guys, why not take 10 to 15 million and sign one really good player that you can sort of ensure that that side, particularly with the right side of the line, is shored up. And that to me seems to be Bean's philosophy, and it hasn't worked. And maybe it's time to change the philosophy because, as you already said, Kev, the Buffalo Bills have one of the, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. And I don't believe they're doing everything in their power to protect him. And that's a big problem. Shouldn't that be their priority?
Yeah, it's crazy, and we can even look at all of the O-line contracts that we've given out, and if you just get rid of 2 or 3 of them and sign one elite player, you would actually be in really good shape. You're paying Ryan Bates $5 million as a backup center and guard. That is ludicrous. That was a horrendous signing that didn't work out. You're paying Mitch Morris over $11 million, and he is mediocre at best. And like you just mentioned, you're paying McGovern another 6-7 million a year. That's over 20 million a year on 3 mediocre offensive linemen. That's not going to get it done in this league. You need 1 or 2 elite players on the O-line. Kansas City went out and signed an elite left tackle in Donovan Smith. Kansas City signed Donovan Smith, and Cincinnati signed an elite left tackle in Orlando Brown. Those guys are making huge money. You don't get elite offensive linemen unless you're drafting in the top 10 of the NFL draft, or you happen to get lucky, or you're giving out massive contracts. The Bills.
Well, there you have it. I mean,
Yeah.
look, Kansas City's won the Super Bowl twice, and Cincinnati has gone to the Super Bowl once and beat us last season badly. So the two teams that I would argue were competing with the most out of anyone else in the conference, at least at this point in time, have both bolstered their offensive lines significantly. And for us, you could make an argument that our offensive line might be a little bit better than it was last season. I think that there's some upgrades, but those upgrades are minimal. They're not significant enough to make a difference. And I know we say this all the time, to take preseason with a grain of salt, but it can't be ignored that when Josh Allen and the first team offense played in this past game, Josh looked like he was having to run for his life, and the offensive line looked like they had quite a handful. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a particularly good defensive line, but those are the kinds of teams you're going to have to beat and you're going to have to perform well against if you want to go to the playoffs. And more importantly, if you plan on going far in the playoffs to the Super Bowl. Those things are not going to happen if Josh Allen is not protected. At the end of the day, I would love to have a great defense. I would love to have a great running game. I would love to have great receivers. But it all really does start with the offensive line, because no matter how good your receivers are, no matter how good your running backs are, no matter how good Josh Allen is, if you can't protect him and give him the time to make those plays, it's not going to matter who you have. It really comes down to the offensive line, and clearly our enemies have figured that out. The Kansas City Chiefs have figured that out. The Cincinnati Bengals have figured that out. And it's something that the Bills still are lacking in. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to go too far down this road of management, because they've done a great job. They've built a perennial Super Bowl contender, but they're having trouble taking that final step. And part of that to me is their unwillingness to make changes to their philosophy. And I know that that's a big thing to ask of a coach and a management, to change their philosophy, particularly when it's worked in the sense of that they make the playoffs every year and that they're a great team. But if you want to take that final step, if you want to make that final push, you may have to look at yourself. Bean may have to look at himself and what he's done and say, hey, I've done the same thing every year and it's done a good job, but it hasn't completed my task. What can I do to change that? And in my opinion, it's spending a little more money on one player and not spending it across various players. I want to cover the last topic today. We'll go a little over our usual 8 o'clock because we didn't jump on as early as usual. But let's talk about the quarterback position. Now, it's the backup position, okay? We have Josh Allen. He's going to be a star, although depending on how good our offensive line is. But let's talk about this backup position, because this is a big battle. It's gone back and forth. I mean, it started out where Kyle Allen looked horrific in the first game. Matt Barkley looked like he was unstoppable. And then we saw almost the opposite. Matt Barkley struggled mightily. Now, he did play the second stringers instead of the third stringers, and Kyle Allen was a little bit better against the third stringers in the second game. Now, the question becomes, firstly, what are the Bills going to do in their final game? Who's going to start and who's going to play the second half? I don't think that they've clarified that yet at this point. I think for me, I'd like to see Kyle Allen start, just because I think he has probably a better shot at being our backup, just because we don't know exactly what we're getting with him. Matt Barkley, we know exactly what we're getting.
Yeah,
I
think to Jake's point, I think even more so, I think it's done. I think Kyle Allen is going to be the backup to start this season, barring getting someone from outside the organization. I think Matt Barkley, we know what he is. We've seen him for many years. He cannot be a starter in the NFL. As much as we would like him to be the player we saw in the second half of the first preseason game. He's not that player. He can't hold up against pressure. He doesn't have good arm strength, especially with the O-line the way it is. Kyle Allen is much more mobile. He's more like Josh Allen. Of course, he's nothing in comparison to Josh Allen. He's way worse, but he can come in and maybe hold the fort for a game or two. But realistically, if Josh Allen goes down for any extended period of time, we're going to have to look outside the organization. I think at this point, Kyle Allen is the backup. I think that's a done deal, barring getting someone from outside the organization.
So you think Matt Barkley's was it 3 picks and a fumble that was enough to lose him
I think that's
the opportunity?
It. Yeah, I think he's long finished from that question. To me, that performance, nail in the coffin. That's it.
And I think to clarify this isn't because Kyle Allen has looked particularly good, but Matt Barkley looked particularly bad.
Yes, I think Matt Barkley's ceiling is very, very low.
Yeah, and look, you bring up a big point there with Kyle Allen's mobility. I think that's a big thing that we do sometimes ignore when we're talking about the backup position, particularly in this Bills offense where we do have concerns about our offensive line. We need to ensure that whoever is leading the offense has the ability to scramble. And I think Kyle Allen kind of surprisingly looks like he's got pretty good speed, specifically in the pocket. But even when he's getting out of the pocket, he seems to have some escapability, which to me is at least a big positive. Again, the hopes are that we don't have to see him play. But if he does have to play at some point during the season and we're unable to find someone outside of the organization, at the very least, if the offensive line struggles as much as we think they might, we have a backup that might find some ways to get out of the pocket. Maybe you do some play action, maybe even some dedicated QB sneaks. Maybe that will at least keep the defense on its heels and give, the offense and Kyle Allen some opportunities. I'm very curious.
And I will say about the offensive line, I don't want to overreact too much, but we did see poor play from the O-line last year, specifically the tackles who are still on the roster. So to me, can they turn it around? Of course they can. And I'm hoping they make a huge turnaround. I'm hoping the light comes on for Spencer Brown and he can be a good tackle. I hope Deion Dawkins gets back to what he was doing 2, 3, 4 years ago. But there's definite concerns. But the interior is new. I really like Osiris Torrance. I think McGovern could be solid at left guard. So the interior, I think, is improved from last year. I'm hoping it's significant improvement. But we'll see. We'll wait and see. I think we give it the first month of the season, and let's see how this O-line gels. Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they will be a top half of the league offensive line. That is my hope for this season. But there are definite concerns.
Yeah, look, we don't want to be unrealistic too. It's not like we expect or need the offensive line to be the best offensive line or a top 5 offensive line for the Bills to be an offensive juggernaut. They don't need that, but they do need to be an average to above average offensive line for us to really see our offense humming the way it should be. I want to close out, and we have to mention it. It's so ridiculous, but I think it was on ESPN or Fox or something where they made this claim that they have sources that are claiming that Stephon Diggs wants to leave. For any of you who haven't seen what's been going on and what Diggs has already tweeted, it's complete nonsense.
Specifically, it was Stephen A. Smith.
Yes, Stephen A. Smith said he had a source who states that Stephon Diggs does not want to be with the Buffalo Bills. Diggs has already now come out and said that is just not true. He loves where he's at. He loves playing with Josh Allen, and he loves the Buffalo Bills, and he's not going anywhere. So anyone who missed Diggs's response, don't worry. Stephon Diggs is going nowhere. And you look, the Buffalo Bills offense is going to be a good offense, but it is going to determine how good we can be based on how well this offensive line plays and whether or not they gel the way, Kev's mentioned, because that's a big piece. I think that a lot of our eggs are in that offensive line basket of some of these guys who we're hoping have some grit and, tough it out. But at this point, certainly a bigger concern. And, it's something to look out for, particularly going into this game again, something to just watch. It's something to keep your eye on. Outside of that, I don't think there's a lot to keep your eye out on. I think the cornerback position is locked up. Dane Jackson is loved once again, and Kaiir Elam obviously has not shown out particularly well in the preseason. Middle linebacker, very unclear what's going to happen there, but I don't think anyone stepping in at this point is going to be very good, especially because McDermott already has come out and said he hasn't been impressed. So I don't think there's a lot to look out for in terms of real battles and stuff like that. I think most stuff is locked up. Maybe those lower position receiver spots, maybe there's a little bit of a battle there, depending on who they're going to determine as their returner. But I don't think there's a whole lot in terms of, true excitement and true battles. And that's a good thing. That means we're a good team. That's not a bad thing. It's good that there isn't so much to talk about. It's good that so much of our episode is dedicated to the backup quarterback position, right?
We should mention that Shorter, 5th-round pick Justin Shorter, also looked really good last game, and it seems like he locked up a position on the roster, which does mean that Andy Isabella is very questionable for the final roster. Unless they're keeping 7 receivers, I don't see a route for him.
Yeah, look, and maybe ends up on the practice squad. I do know the practice squad's getting increased so they can have a few more players. It's a shame for players like that, but that's how it is when you're on a really good roster, when there's a lot of depth, particularly on the offense. So a guy like Andy Isabella, he hasn't shown up the way you would have liked in terms of the return game. And I think that that's probably why he might not make the roster. But I do think he's a bit of a fan favorite, and that's just because he's exciting to watch. When he makes a nice catch and he's blazing down the sideline, he's certainly exciting. But it does give me some feels of Isaiah McKenzie, who after a little while I kind of got tired of, and I don't really want another player like that. And hopefully Deontay Hardy isn't. Hopefully he's better than that. But yeah, look, it's a lot to look forward to. The Buffalo Bills are going to be a hell of a good team this year, but there's certainly things that aren't perfect with this roster, just like any roster. But look, as we say every single week, we're going to be watching every game. Go Bills.
Go Bills.